We're back with Keith Morrison.
It's been a long time.
I miss the Keithisms.
There are aplenty.
I know.
In this one.
Hi, Jillian Benzavali.
Hi, Patrick Hines.
All right, fam, breaking news, big announcement. Okay, so my book is coming out September 26th, 2023. That's in a month from now, just about.
Yeah.
On the day it comes out, we are doing a launch party for the listeners as a thank you. It's free. It's at a secret location. It's going to be open bar, free food. If you got a book by coming to like one of the book parties or one of our live shows, we're going to have it for you there at the event. To pick up, I'm going to sign. We're doing performances by drag queens.
Fun.
You're going to drink your faces off. The catch is this. I can only invite 200 listeners. So here's what you got to do, fam. You got to text me if you want to be entered. We're going to randomly draw the winners. If you're going to be in New York City, or you can be in New York City on September 26th.
It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday. The party is from 6:30 to 9 p.m. You will get the details when you get the invitation to the party. Then text me now. My phone number is 917-983-3733. Text party to that number if you want to come to my free book release party as a thank you for the listeners. Open bar, free food, drag queens, food, pictures, me, you, and everybody else.
It sounds really fun.
It's going to be really fun. I'm a DJ. It's going to be the whole thing.
Oh, we're
Photo
dancing?
booth. We're dancing.
I love
it's going to be wild.
booth. Okay, great. Let's do it.
Text me if you want to come. Other than that, fam, please join the Patreon.
Sure.
I keep forgetting to say, every single week you get a full bonus episode.
Yeah.
So like the one you're listening to right now with ads, you're going to get a full bonus one of those every single week.
Right.
Ad-free. There's over 350 of them already there for you to download and binge right this second.
Plus, like all the series we do.
Well, that's what it is. It's all the series. My new favorite one is the Who Killed Robert Wan.
Yep.
It was a two-parter about a man who was murdered. And the setup is it's four men in a house. One gets murdered. Did the other three men do it or not? It's not as cut and dry as you think.
Yeah, opinions were had.
It's really great. So patreon.com/truecrimeobsessed. You can also get all of our episodes ad-free there as well.
Yes.
We have after parties where we just like shoot the breeze.
Yeah, or we give advice, very fun, loose, fun advice. Yeah, we just hang out. It's fun. It's fun.
Patreon is very fun.
There's a lot going on.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right, girl, what are we talking about today?
We are talking, it's called Who Killed Angie Dodge? Keith Morrison Investigates.
When a beloved teenager, Angie Dodge, is found murdered in her own home, her mother embarks on a mission to hunt down the killer and the truth.
I'm just driven to put a face to this monster.
A confession leads to a conviction.
You are absolutely convinced that you've got the right guy.
There is no doubt.
But the case is far from closed. When hours of interrogation tapes are made public,
I wasn't there.
they ignite a firestorm of controversy.
Wow, this guy really was set up.
They took it too far. They broke his brain.
The person who killed Angie Dodge is still out there.
So we are with Keith on the Snake River in Idaho Falls, Idaho.
It's a lovely spot, as he says.
It's a lovely spot. He's been thinking about this place since he first came here in 2012 to meet a remarkable woman named Carol Dodge.
I don't know if I've ever met someone more remarkable in my life.
So I got to tell you, like, this woman, she's obviously Angie's mother. Angie is our victim in this episode. And Carol is so remarkable because she's a fighter. She's a survivor. She wears her heart on her sleeve. She does the right thing at every fucking turn.
16,000 miles on her truck trying to get to the bottom of this goddamn thing. And what she's doing is very hard because she's trying to release the man convicted of the murder of her daughter due to a false confession.
But she thought he was the guy. For 10 years, she thought he was guilty.
And so she does that thing that we talk about must be so hard for families to do, like to get that closure, get justice, and then have to change your mind when she's faced with the truth of this insane case.
And people who are famous in the exonerate business, old friends we're going to see again in this episode.
I screamed. I was like, Buddy the Elf.
I know.
I don't know.
But they are all going to say, like, there is no victims' parents never get this involved in the exoneration of the people convicted of killing their loved ones. This woman is incredible.
And I'm not saying it's easy, but Carol proves that it is possible.
100%. So it's night of the murder. It's June 13th, 1996. It's a stale, hot night in Idaho Falls.
Keith, you know what?
I know.
Angie Dodge, an independent 18-year-old, was at home in Idaho Falls, upstairs in her tiny top-floor apartment, a place she had called her own for less than a month.
She's 18, and
She's 18.
I know that you're a legal adult, and I know that that's when I moved out of my mom's house, but it feels young.
Ms. Hypocrite.
I know. It just feels young to be living on your own, you know what I mean?
But kids go to college at 18.
I know. Well, that's what I did. I remember the day that I remember my first night of orientation at college where I was in Boston, and I was walking across Berkeley Street, right on the corner of Berkeley and Boylston, and I had the thought,
I'm too small to be here on my own.
No one's expecting me home tonight.
Yeah.
That was the first time in my life I'd ever experienced that. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, totally.
So she had some friends over until around 12:30 a.m. And we don't really know what happened after that. And that's where we meet Brian Clark. He's a reporter.
Yeah. So the next morning, Angie doesn't show up for work, and two of her coworkers get concerned. They call her a few times, and then at between 10:30 and 10:45 a.m., they go to her house. And I'm saying, who are these hero?
I know.
I've seen this from time to time. These amazing coworkers who like
Shanann. Remember Shanann's best friend?
Yes, Shanann Watts.
Yeah,
yes,
Shanann Watts.
Yes.
She was just like, something is wrong. I know something is wrong. I'm trusting my gut here.
It's amazing that people care this much.
And remember, it's 1996, so no cell phones. They can't they can't even beep her. Maybe there's no email. Their options are wait around and panic, or just go to her house and try to make moves, and that's what they do.
So around 10:30, 10:45, they went to knock on the door, and they found the door was a little bit ajar. So they went up into the house, looked, and went back to the back bedroom and saw her laying there, immediately backed out and called the police.
And they immediately run out and call the cops.
And this is where we learn that murders are so rare in this town. They get maybe
0 to 1 per year.
0 to 1 per year. They're maybe 1 a year. But even the 1 is rare.
Yes.
So Keith's 0 to 1 per year. Oh, shit.
Detective Ken is here. He tells us...
These cops suck.
I wish we had the garbage bell.
Oh, ding. Oh,
Ken. She's back.
Fucking ding.
I know.
Oh, and who's the other one? Jim or whatever? I'll get to him in a minute.
Detective Garbage Ken tells us it was a brutal homicide. There was a lot of passion involved, he says, in whoever did this. I said, we've got to start using a different word.
I know.
Passion does that thing where it romanticizes the violence.
I know, because it means two different things. It's just, when you're passionate about something. I know, it's sort of been co-opted as...
Yeah, we've got to change the narrative because people, in another episode we just did, they're in America, we have a hard time distinguishing between abuse and passion. Yeah. It shouldn't be that hard.
Also, the term prolific, the word prolific, I don't love. I get it. I know what the Webster's Dictionary defines it as. I understand it, but prolific
private school
means no. When you Google it,
you can define prolific. What, you go to private school?
It just means you do a lot of things in a little amount of time, right?
Correct.
Okay, great.
But they say
the killer clearly wanted Angie to suffer. She had been stabbed over and over again. Her throat slit.
Just making sure that with all their ability that she was dead.
Yeah. Overkill, I think they call it.
Right.
Overkill, I think they call it. And I'm like, don't be humble, Keith. You're Keith goddamn Morrison. You've been doing this for 100 years.
She'd been stabbed over and over again. Her throat was slit. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Because people are evil.
Yes.
And to make it worse, semen was left at the scene. It was on Angie's body. Now, this is horrible.
Horrible.
But the only thing that is a positive to come out of this, if I can even say it that way, it's that it's good for evidence, right? There's something to be tested. There's something to be matched.
And that's really interesting because it's 1996, and I didn't realize we were that far along in DNA testing, but I thought that was an early 2000s thing, so I was happy to know that was a thing that they could test then.
I mean, that's just what I thought of it. I probably should have looked at it. Yeah.
Because they do test the DNA all throughout this thing.
Yeah, oh God.
Now we meet Carol, Angie's mom.
The best.
But the thing that isn't the best is how she found out that her daughter had been murdered.
Yeah.
She remember those heroes that we loved, the coworkers that went to check on Angie? Well, one of them fucking answers the phone when Carol calls the job just asking if Angie wants to go out to lunch.
To take her out to lunch.
And one of the coworkers says, Angie's been found dead. You need to call the cops.
Oh,
that's
my
how
God.
Angie's mom found out that she had been murdered.
And I have to say, she has the strength of 1,000 bears. What's a really
Cute
strong
ears and
thing?
all. Yeah.
You want to hug her, but you don't want to fuck with her. And she's awesome. I think she would be, she would make really good cookies and be a good host if you came over, but she also gets shit done. I just love her. But the strength that she has, from the minute she found out, there's no good way to find this out.
Yeah.
But she found out in a particularly shitty way.
Yeah.
From the minute she hears about this, her strength has been, and not to say that she has been emotionless, of course she's, but to be able to move forward in the ways that she does, she's an inspiration. This is why I fucking love women. Let the women do the work. She has, she's the best.
It's so funny. We always get asked at Q&As if you're going to do more Let the Women. And every time we get one of these women, I'm like,
just like,
we need to do a Carol
I
episode.
need to be friends with Carol. She's the best.
But we also learned that like this first interview with Carol is from 2012, which is when Keith covered this for Dateline. And I don't know much about this Keith Morrison Presents, which is what this is an episode of.
I thought you were going to say this Keith Morrison person.
Much about this Keith Morrison. But like, it seems like he gets to take his cases from Dateline and expand them into his own documentary.
Yes, we've done this before.
Yeah.
But like, she's really devastated, but she also wants to really find the truth no matter what, unlike some families we hear about sometimes.
100%. And so we sort of get the Dodge family backstory.
The Dodge family had been drawn to this wholesome town in eastern Idaho 12 years earlier in 1984.
The main religion is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is Mormon colloquially. More than half of people belong to that religion in this area. And so it's a very tight-knit family community.
More than half the people who live in the area are Mormons. We don't know if they are or not, but it's a very tight-knit, family-oriented community. The Dodges have 3 boys and a girl, baby Angie, and of course, like being the youngest and the girl and the baby of the family, she's like the apple of the father's eye.
Yeah.
That's the first and last time we hear about the dad.
Yeah.
We never get anything else about him.
And that's it. But we do meet Brent, her brother.
Yes.
And he tells us, Angie was fun, loving, bubbly. She was always busy. She was excited for life. She was just always like up and around and doing things.
I loved that descriptor of her as like always busy.
Yeah.
She just was curious and wanted to do things all the time.
She had like work friends, and then she was hosting people because she was so excited about her new apartment.
Yes.
Like she just always had a full dance card.
100%.
And Angie's mom, Carol, just says, it was so, she says this thing that is so like visceral and heartbreaking about how it was so hard for her to go on because she'd be out in the world and she'd be like, how can you be walking around like nothing happened? Like my world stopped. How are you food shopping right now? Like everything's fine when nothing is fine.
It's really sad. Like, of course, we're friends with Julie Murray and we follow her on TikTok, and she says all the time, like, she didn't choose Maura's case to become her life. That's just what happens when a loved one disappears or is murdered. These people for whom that happens are so strong to be able to like
too.
I know, to like
My
go
God.
and devote their lives to the justice of it all or the finding of the sister. It's just like not what the life they would have chosen, but they are up to the challenge.
Exactly.
Now
people are worried that there's a killer on the loose
because
guess what? There is.
This is a town that has 0 to 1 murders a year. Mostly it's 0.
So there are no suspects, and the cops do like the one good thing, which is starting close and going like talking to our friends and family.
Yes.
That's the only and it ends. Actually, that wasn't even good because it's fucked the whole thing up. God, these cops are the worst.
They're really bad. And, they rule out Angie's family and her boyfriend. They move on to the friends who stopped by earlier in the night that she was killed.
Yeah.
They also say the murder weapon was never recovered, but detectives knew they had a key piece of evidence to work with because of the semen that was found at the scene.
Right.
But the DNA doesn't match the boyfriend or any of the friends who came over, so it's none of them.
Right. And like, did she know her killer? Her mother was worried about this. Like, who did she know that maybe her friends didn't know? That didn't really.
Because the mom had a weird last phone call with her. Her mom said that like in their last call,
she said to me, Mom, I've done something really stupid.
Did you say to her, what'd you do?
No, I didn't, because I didn't want to pry.
Carol feared that Angie might have gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd, and she looked to investigators to confirm her suspicion.
So we don't know if that's connected to the murder or not, but Angie seemed to have been worried about something.
And this feels like a pretty bad edit because I feel like Carol because it made it seem like Angie said, Mom, I did something stupid. And then Carol was like, okay, bye. Click. Yeah. And I don't think that's what happened. I'm sure she said like, if you want to talk about it, I'm here, but I'm not going to pry. I just can't imagine Carol from the 90 minutes I spent with her.
No, because Carol also strikes me as that parent who is the right amount of in your business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And also she and Angie, like they were going to go out to lunch. She was going to take her to lunch. They have a relationship, I think, where you could talk to Carol. But Carol says, that exchange will haunt her forever. And Carol, like, again, the only person at fault here is the person
killer
who did it and also the cops who fucked it up.
Yeah, and Carol is also the mom who, she says, I would go to the police department every day they were open, and every day they would say they didn't know anything. I also think that Carol is the mother of a victim who the cops like. Like, I feel like she went in there and did it exactly the right way, where she would, like, find out if there was updates on the case in a way that wasn't annoying.
And they still weren't doing anything for her.
Still weren't doing anything.
So days and weeks and months go by, and so Carol just says, fuck this, or fudge this, whatever Mormons say.
Right.
And launches her own investigation.
Yeah.
This is where she put 16,000 miles on her truck. She was driving everywhere. She was just doing the fucking work. And she was doing it herself from the ground up based on like instinct and gut because the cops weren't helping her out.
know. And I'm like, how do you know what to, Carol? Let me learn from you.
Know.
Be my teacher, Carol. But now we learn about Angie's friends that she hung out with. Like the Snake River is the river that goes through town. It's where Keith was standing at the top of the episode.
Yes. It's a lovely spot, as he reminds us. Lovely.
But like, it's also like the place where all the kids in town like to hang out. Like, it's like this big, beautiful, roaring river.
Yeah. And so even though no one matched the DNA found at the scene, the cops are focusing on some of her friends, like Jeremy Sargis and Chris Tapp. Now, I want to say something here. Chris Tapp is not white. I don't know his race. They don't mention it. I'm certainly not going to guess.
Right.
But I know that he is not white. And that is very important here.
And we should say that like Jeremy and Chris are very good friends. And Jeremy describes Chris, like we know that Chris was battling drug addiction from a very young age.
She just was so lighthearted. Just such a dedicated friend.
When Jeremy and his friends met Chris at the river, they took him under their wings.
We liked the guy, so we kept him. Tried to keep him out of trouble. He needed some good friends to take care of him.
This kid needed help, like staying on the straight and narrow, and I was gonna like be that good friend for him.
Yeah, I didn't love that idea that he's just like not a human. He's just like this thing. Because at one point he's like, "Oh, so we kept him," and I'm like, "I'm sure that's maybe a cute thing that you said to each other," but it took me right out of it. I was like, "He's a person."
I thought it was so sweet that it was like they found this kid that was having a hard time, and they're like, "We're gonna be your friend, and we're gonna take care of you."
That part I liked. Yeah, being nice to people. You know how much
can
I
always
love
count
that.
on you to be nice, to like to be nice to people.
I hope so. But I hope you can count on me for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just felt a little, I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into it.
So Jeremy and Chris and the other kids from the river, they're all eager to help find the killer. The police question all of them, and Jeremy's saying, like, we wanted to be helpful. Like, if you have nothing to hide, why wouldn't you be helpful?
To which I say, oh, no.
I know.
Oh, that's like the kiss of death. You don't say that. Or at least you say the word lawyer.
I go back and forth about, like, I want to say I feel the same way, but we talked on the other episode about how, like, if my plane landed and I got service again and I found out that Daisy and Steve were dead, my first call would be to an attorney.
Mike and I have had conversations about, so we don't panic.
Yeah.
What's the plan? Like, if I call you and I'm like, get a lawyer, I'm like, who would you call? Like, what lawyer would you call? Like, that's in place. Please. Like, everyone have those fucking conversations because people are in danger out there.
It's true.
Like, please.
And remember your rights. Now we learn about Ben Hobbs. So he was, like, I don't understand this. He was one of Angie's close friends. He was interviewed by the police. They didn't see much in him. They let him, like, you know, they just questioned him. But we learned that after Christmas, he's arrested in Nevada for a, quote, brutal rape and cutting of a woman with a knife.
So this is a year after Angie's been murdered.
Yeah.
It turns out that this Ben piece of shit
who's like dear friends with all these kids we just met and like,
please, it raped this woman at knife point. And also, Angie's killer used a knife.
Right.
So that's a little interesting.
So Ben becomes like a prime suspect.
Yeah. And Ben, the rapist, did not have an alibi for the murder.
But he also gives them an alibi that doesn't check out. So, like, not only does he not have one, he lied.
He's lying. So they're going to test Ben's DNA to see if it's a match. And while they wait for the results, they talk to Ben's friends.
Yes.
And the cops also keep calling the friends associates. Like, can you do your job? Like, enough with the cop speak and just do your job. These people suck.
So they bring Jeremy back in. He's adamant that he knows nothing about the murder or Ben's participation in it. And then next, Detective Furman brings Chris Tapp back in. He was like the, quote, straggler that the kids decided to keep. Now, the thing to know about Detective Furman and Chris is that they know each other.
They'd first met when Furman was a police officer assigned to Chris's junior high school.
He was in trouble a time or two.
It was. So just trying to help him out.
So you had something of a relationship.
We did. And I think that's what really helped, you know, once we were able to get Chris to come in and speak with us.
So, like, Chris was getting in trouble a lot, and this cop knew this. Chris trusted him. Now, Chris tells his mom, he's my friend. Everyone, pull the fuck over and say it with me. The cops are never your friends. If you're one of those people who think there are a bunch of good ones out there, even the good ones aren't your friends.
Yeah.
This is a harsh reality that we have to. The cops are never your friends, ever.
Because, like, they're trying to do a job, too. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not defending cops, but I am just saying that, like, what the cops would say is they got to find the guy.
Right.
And if they're going to exploit a relationship, if Chris actually had been the killer, it would have been lucky for the cop that he had a relationship with Chris and Chris trusted him.
And it's just interesting that, like, Jeremy, the friend, who's also friends with Ben, the rapist, like, Chris and Jeremy have the same evidence against them, which is nothing.
Exactly.
The same friends. Jeremy is off on his merry way.
Yep.
And Chris, because this cop knows him and is, quote, friends with him,
yep.
Chris gets the brunt of it. Cops are never your friends. I'll say it 100 times.
No, and so, Chris says he has no issue going down to talk to this Furman guy without an attorney, but he denies knowing anything about the murder.
Right. And so, he says, if I knew something, I'd tell you, but I really don't. Now, and then he's not saying the word lawyer. He's just going home.
Right.
3 days later, he goes in again without a lawyer.
And changes his story.
And now the story is Ben the rapist told Chris that Ben the rapist had killed Angie.
Yes.
Chris is like, I thought it was a joke, and now I realize it wasn't. What we'll get into later that is not being clear here is that Chris has been badgered into a false confession and into telling them something for 3 days.
And I gotta say that, it's shitty storytelling on the part of the documentary because it makes it sound like Chris came back and then of his own volition came back to tell a new story. That's not true.
Like what happened to Robert Wand, by the way.
Exactly.
That's exactly what happened to Robert Wand.
But what happened with Chris is that he came back in for another interview.
He now said Ben Hobbs had told him that he killed Angie, but Chris said he thought it was a joke. With no attorney present, Chris followed up this admission with a 7-page written statement detailing Ben's confession. It laid the groundwork for a story that would continue to change over time.
Chris follows up that admission with a 7-page written statement.
Right.
Detailing Ben's confession. And what that says to the cops is Chris knows an awful fucking lot about this murder.
Yeah.
So it's either, to the cops, it's either this guy, Ben, or Chris. And remember, we're waiting to see if Ben's DNA matches the semen found on the scene.
And this is where Keith said it laid the groundwork for a story that would change over time.
But the story only changes Keith because the cops keep making him change it. He's not changing it on his own.
No. And Keith knows that because
it's deceptive storytelling.
But which is a shame because it ends up being great storytelling down the line when Keith is trying to hold them accountable and actually says but you badgered him. You know that, right?
Yes.
So that's a little frustrating, I think, for us because we know Keith so well at this point. We've seen so many and we know where the story ends. And it's Keith, but this is if you've never watched a Dateline before.
Right.
You know,
and they're just trying to keep us hooked.
Right.
So now we're back to that guy, Ben. So the Nevada
Ben the rapist.
So he gets convicted of that crime. Mm-hmm. And he speaks to the detectives in the Angie Dodge case willingly without a lawyer.
And this is absolutely chilling.
He says the words, I didn't kill Angie Dodge. I wouldn't kill my friends. Sorry. To which I said, so I guess you only rape strangers?
Would I rape someone at knife point? 100%. But I don't kill my friends. Because then, that was incredibly chilling. But then he goes, well, was she raped?
Right.
Basically saying well, that proves my innocence right there. I'm a rapist, not a murderer.
He's like, I would know, as a rapist, I would know that if she was raped, I would be excluded because I didn't rape her.
He's like, if I'm doing anything, I'm raping somebody. I'm definitely not murdering them.
I mean, but honestly,
that's what he's saying.
And the cops are like, yeah, you kind of got us there because they get the DNA back and it's not a match.
But the fact that I never want him to see the light. Look, you know how I feel about the prison system, but Jesus Christ, for him to say that, was she raped? Well, obviously it wasn't me. Right. I only rape people.
I know.
Oh my God. And guess what? His fucking DNA doesn't match.
So they release him. They tell us that Chris's DNA also isn't a match, but they continue to question him because Chris doesn't have a solid alibi. And we never get any answers about this.
And I'm like, but doesn't he if his DNA doesn't match?
I mean,
isn't that part of it?
I get, but they're saying because he gave that written confession, the police are now starting to formulate the idea that he could have been there and been a part of it.
There was someone else involved.
The rapist. Right, exactly.
Now, Chris's family hires lawyers.
Chris's family hired attorneys, but they weren't always present for his interviews. In total, Chris was interrogated on 9 different days, given 6 polygraphs, and questioned for more than 40 hours.
They weren't always there for interviews.
This doesn't make any sense.
Excuse me?
Because my question is, do they hire lawyers or were they given a public defender?
Well, either way, show the fuck up.
Or at least advise your clients not to do anything without you being there.
Right. Because over 9 days, he was interviewed 9 times, to which I'm like, Ferris Bueller, 9 times, 6 polygraphs, and questioned for more than 40 hours. This should be illegal. If you are actually saying you don't have anything on him, the DNA doesn't match, he should 9 days, 6 polygraphs, and which are bullshit, by the way.
Well, because I just want to say this.
They're a bargaining tactic.
And I want to say this now so we don't lose it later. They're using the polygraphs to scare him, to get him to say what they want him to say so they can say he did it.
This is insane. You don't have a single piece of evidence on this person. It's so obvious they're trying to get a false confession. This should not be legal.
Right.
Like 40 hours, 9 days?
Like all of this should have been, like the entire case against him should have been thrown out when this became clear.
Right.
Chris sticks to his story about Ben being the killer and him being there for it, but also the cops get him to also say that he was holding a knife to her and cut her while Ben was raping her.
Which cannot be true because the people in the story don't match the DNA.
Right.
So listen to this. Like, don't just pick and choose the point of the false confessions that you like.
Which is what they're going to do throughout and at trial.
But you know that Ben the rapist did not rape Angie Dodge. His DNA isn't there. So the majority of the story that Chris is telling you right now cannot be true.
Well, the cops have an answer for that.
Of course they do.
They decide.
As for the semen that was found on Angie's body, police had now established a theory that a third man was involved in the murder and had violated Angie. Chris could not correctly name that person, but police maintained the unknown man was in Angie's apartment with Chris and Ben.
But this theory proves that they know what Chris is saying isn't entirely true.
Right.
Because his story is that Ben raped her. Why wouldn't Ben Seaman be there? And now they're just like, we only believe the good parts. We're going to make up some mystery person.
And this is where, as a person who does this for a living, it is mind-boggling to see it in action. That the cops kind of flip from wanting to get the guy to wanting to get any guy.
Get this guy.
To get this guy. And the blind, to actually have the video of the interrogation and see all of these moments where they just get the single focus blinders and they're just zeroing in on, they're doing anything they can do to get Chris.
And it's so obvious, it's egregious. It should make you, my stomach hurt.
Exactly.
It should make you sick. This is a kid who is alone in there. Where is his fucking lawyer that his family's wasting money on? How was he interviewed 9 times and the lawyer didn't put a stop to it, or the lawyer wasn't there? Where are these other interviews?
And the thing is, it's Ben was at least loud enough to be like, well, was she raped? Because if she was, it wasn't me.
God.
Jeremy, they had nothing on and they let him go. Chris just keeps going back for the interviews because he trusts the cop. And so they let Ben go. And then we learn on February 3rd, 1987, Chris is charged with rape and first-degree murder based solely on his confession that he helped Ben kill Angie.
Right. They couldn't even arrest him before they charged him because they didn't have any actual evidence, just the confession.
Right.
Think about that.
And what's wild is that they arrest him on the rape and the first-degree murder charges based on his confession that he helped Ben kill Angie. So, making Ben the actual person who did the killing, but they don't ever arrest or charge Ben.
Right. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
If you really, really think about that, that is so fucked up.
How is that even possible?
It's insane. And it happens all the time. That's the thing.
We jump to 2 years later. We're at Chris Tapp's trial. And Carol, Angie's mom, is there.
They showed the crime scene photos and talked about all of her wounds. I never heard how horrific it was until we went through trial.
She did not know how brutal this killing was until the trial 2 years later, because they're showing crime scene photos and autopsy photos. It's just I hate that she felt that she had to put herself through that.
I know. So Chris is found guilty of rape and murder. He's sentenced to life plus 20 years, and he's eligible for parole in 30 years.
That math does not make any sense to me. Because if Chris had actually done this and did these horrible things and got life plus 20, but is eligible for parole in 30 years, that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. Well, but it's just they get to tick it off their list. That's really all it is. So now at the moment, of course, the Dodge family hates Chris.
Right.
Because in this moment, well, of course, they believe it and they just want some kind of justice or some kind of closure.
Yep.
So I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, fine. So Chris is in prison. But according to the story that put him there, there are 2 men who are not in prison and not charged.
And we know who one of them is. One of them is Ben, and he is specifically not charged with anything.
So cops, are we going to get them too, or just the brown kid? Are we?
And that's where Carol, the mom, comes in, because she becomes obsessed with the DNA found on Angie's body. And she's like, all right, Chris was there. He helped do this. I guess we're not going to go after Ben, but we're going to find the guy whose DNA matches the semen.
The mystery DNA.
Right, because he's going to be the guy to tell the story about what really happened.
And so she's not going to rest until the case is completely solved, because the cops put some brown kid away, and so they don't care. They stop working the case.
Exactly.
So a decade goes by, thanks cops, with no movement at all. And this is where Carol calls Dr. Gregg of the Idaho Innocence Project.
Carol would not rest until the case was completely solved. She began poring over the murder file, trying to make sense of that theory developed by police, and now the linchpin of the entire case.
I go through these reports. I have thousands of papers, and I just go, what part of this don't I understand?
It didn't make sense.
She's watching all of this and reading all of this, and she's like, it's not adding up.
And also, Chris couldn't name this third person.
Right.
He doesn't know who it is because he wasn't there.
So she calls Dr. Greg of the Idaho Innocence Project, and she's like, can you please explain this to me? And
he's an
like,
internationally known DNA expert.
He goes, I might be able to help you, but I should let you know that we've just agreed to take Chris's case because we don't think he did this.
Right. And when she learns that, do you know what Carol says? Carol says, I just want to know what happened to my daughter. I know. I know Carol is a unicorn.
Yes.
I understand that.
Yes.
I know every situation is different. I know what I don't know. I know all of that.
Yeah.
But like, it is possible to have this point of view.
And I gotta say, I mean,
it's not easy.
It's not easy, but also Carol's done the work.
Yes.
And like, not all families are able emotionally to do that.
Of course not.
Or have the time or the privilege
She's
to
a unicorn.
have the time.
Everything is different. Everything. I don't know what her money situation is like. I don't know like how she has the ability to do this, but I'm just saying, getting there emotionally is possible.
100%.
So they found pubic hairs at the scene, and they'd never been tested. So they're finally tested, and these pubic hairs are not a match for Chris.
And they're not a match for Angie. So it's like or Ben. The pubic hairs match the DNA of the semen left on Angie's body.
Right.
Which further proves that it's just one person. It's not Chris and Ben and this mystery person, because there's no evidence that Chris was there other than his confession. And Carol, the mom, has pored over his confessions and can tell she's starting to believe that they were coerced.
And she's like, wait a second, hold on. There's a lot of DNA at the scene, but none of it matches the guy in prison for the crimes?
Right.
Like
and all of the DNA of like the pubic hair and the semen, and like the touch DNA that they're going to find on other objects in the room all match the same person.
Right.
So Dr. Greg and Carol, they all are like, it's starting to look like it's not Chris, and it really is just one other mystery person.
Right. And now it's been 13 years, so this is a really big bombshell. But this is where she's like, okay, this is not the right guy in prison.
Yes.
This is not it. But now Carol learns about false confessions and wrongful convictions because she can't understand. Like many people, when you first hear about this for the first time, like, why would he do this? Until she watched every last second of those tapes, every minute of every interview. And she was like, oh my God.
Because it's not just Chris. She's watching Ben's interviews and she's watching Jeremy's interviews. And she's saying,
what I realized is their strategy was that they were trying to get each one of these guys
roll
on the other one. Ben and Jeremy were much smarter. And Chris, what I realized is that because Detective Furman had been a school cop when Chris was going to high school, Chris trusted him.
Carol is starting to realize that, like, this has been pinned on Chris because he was the easiest one.
And she says, like, they played the hypothetical game. And Keith's like, tell me more about that. That sounds wild. And she's like, they do this thing where, like, they don't say you, they say Chris Tapp, like in the third person.
Yes.
And they just say, like, all right, you cut her, Chris, fine. Just tell us that Chris cut her. And they're coercing him, and they're just
he keeps being like, no, but I didn't do that. And they're like, right, but hypothetically, let's say that you did. He's like, okay, no, but I didn't.
It's so hard to watch.
And it's also, like, this is where it's hard because I've never been in this situation to understand that this really happens. They start to make Chris question reality.
At one point, and I'm like, oh my God, my heart is breaking, where he's like, but wouldn't I remember it?
He goes from, no, I wasn't there, no, I didn't do this, to wait, was I there?
And we've seen this before.
Yes.
And this, I feel like, is the moment when these shitty cops were like, we fucking got him.
Exactly.
That's what they're waiting for. They are trying to break you down until you're like, because then he's like malleable. You can manipulate someone who is second guessing reality.
And what's so crazy about this is that you can't tell me the cops they're doing whatever it takes to break him down because they have the evidence that he was the killer and that he was there. Because they don't. There's no evidence at all that Chris was there, except for the confession that he provided after they badgered him to the point of not knowing what was real anymore.
Yeah, and they figure, like, the cop who was, quote, his friend, who's never a friend, was just like, he's gotten in trouble in high school. Like, we can easily pin this on this kid. A jury will believe it.
I'm just saying that, like, right, like, the cops have to be coming at it from that perspective.
Yes.
They're not coming at this because they firmly believe he's the killer.
No
They just
way.
know they can get him.
Exactly. And,
God, that is so
it's so fucked up. Fuck these guys.
Yeah.
So, like, and poor Carol, like, she's crying to Keith and saying, I'm crying for Chris, I'm crying for his mother. Like, he's an only child. Let him go.
Yeah, and the thing that really stands out to Carol, she says,
Carol Dodge became convinced that Chris Tapp had been fed information and was coerced into confessing to Angie's murder. When detectives fed him information, he'd repeat it back to them, thinking they were helping him give accurate details about Angie's murder, and the immunity agreement would stand.
she starts to see Furman, the cop that Chris trusts, telling Chris details that only the killer would know, and then getting him to incorporate it in.
Just like say it back to him.
Exactly.
And he didn't know the map of the house. Like this was like Jesse Miss Kelly all over again.
He didn't know what room she was murdered in.
Right.
And he's saying the living room, the cop's like, you mean the bedroom. You killed her in
like
the bedroom.
How many, like Jay Wilds, like how many times have we
Brendan
fucking heard
Dassey,
this?
I know.
How many times? And Jay is different because the cops were telling him what to say. That was a different thing.
Oh my God, the tapping. I can't with the tapping.
Dollars to donuts. But that's how they lead you. And then they only play like the good parts of the confession to the jury. Like we've seen this. These cops have a fucking playbook. It's all the same story.
It's very hard to watch in real time Chris start to question reality.
His face.
Because he starts to believe that he was there. He starts to believe that he actually did this.
And then once they're just like, we got him, they do this incredibly, even more fucked up thing. They offer him an immunity deal. So they're tricking him.
All the while knowing it's bullshit.
Right. They're tricking him into being, quote, truthful about the crime. So Chris thinks this is an out for him. He thinks he's protected. That he just repeat everything back to the cops, thinking he was safe.
Incriminate himself, and that's fine because I've got an immunity deal. Right. I'm just going to tell them, and I'll pin it on Ben, I'll pin it on Jeremy, whoever.
And this is my friend.
Yep.
No, they're not your friend. So, of course, this fell apart. It was meant to. It was never actually a real deal.
Because
where's his lawyer?
Exactly. And he has a lawyer. Because what Chris is telling us.
Chris had been offered an immunity agreement that would protect him from prosecution in exchange for cooperating with police, as long as he gave truthful information about the crime.
As long as I was truthful. And so he implicates himself, and because the cops know all of it is lies, they're like, we're going to keep the implication part, but now we're going to get you for telling lies. The immunity deal's off the table, and now you're the fucking killer.
Just when you think they couldn't get more evil. Like, imagine offering this kid this thing, knowing it's all bullshit, knowing you're just going to tick a box. Like, that's it.
Just to really break it down to like the brass tacks, I take such pride in my work. I take pride in doing a good job. I take pride in working hard. I take pride in like creating something that people like. I cannot imagine what it must feel like to be like, I'm just going to go to work today and get anybody I can to clear this case off my desk, knowing I'm lying, knowing I'm tricking this kid. How does that feel good? How do you get out of bed and want to go back to work the next day?
I mean, I think there are many people in law enforcement, many cops who get into it for the power trip. To be able to, like, you know, throw someone on the ground and be able to be like, oh, I put this guy away. Like, I think that's a big part of it.
I get in trouble with listeners sometimes for like defending the bad guy. And where that really comes from is my own naivete and my also just general want to see the best in people.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to believe and really accept that people can just be evil.
And like, these guys are. Like, I can't imagine that they were just trying to, I mean, you can see it. They were just trying to break this kid down and then, like, trick him into this immunity deal.
It's hard to watch because it's hard to accept that that's what's really happening.
But to me, it's like, it feels like I'm watching a rerun. How often does this happen? So the last time Keith spoke to these cops was in 2012.
Yeah.
Ken Brown had been promoted to captain with the Idaho Falls Police. Jared Furman had become mayor of the city. Both men vehemently denied any wrongdoing in their interrogations of Chris Tapp.
So Jared, he's the Furman guy. He's the one that Chris thought was his friend. He's the mayor of this town now.
And neither of them will admit to any wrongdoing back in 2012. But they're also lying because they're sitting down with Keith together. And Keith is back in 2012.
Yeah.
Keith is just like, fellas, can you level with me? Like, what's all this bullshit? And they're like, watch the interviews. We never fed him information. That is a blatant lie. And we see them do it about 50 times.
Why doesn't Keith have the receipts is my question. Why? Like, I want Keith to wheel in a TV like my 7th grade science teacher.
Right.
Like, slip the tape in the VCR and be like, this is you feeding him the misinformation.
Yeah. Well, he gets a little bit more heavy-handed in a minute.
Because I'm just kind of like, that's a provable lie.
It is a provable lie. But right now, like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So by 2012, Chris has appealed 4 times. And now we meet his current lawyer, John Thomas.
Yes.
Who believes that he's innocent. He's working to get him out of prison. He was assigned to the case in 2009.
And the first call he got was from Angie's mom saying, girl, there's something terribly wrong with this case. You got to watch the tapes. And he's like just another in a line of people on Chris's side who are like, we don't get calls like that.
Yeah, that never happens.
That was unusual.
The victim's mom is calling, being like, look at this coerced confession.
And Angie's mom, like, her whole thing is like, we got to get him out so we can find the real actual fucking killer.
Exactly. We're just wasting a whole lot of time here. So John listens to Carol and he's like, oh my God, holy shit, they're totally coercing him. You're absolutely right.
Over and over, investigators would suggest scenarios for how the crime went down. and asked 20-year-old Chris to confirm that's how it happened.
In fact, they're saying that Chris was stabbing Angie as he was also holding her down. Like, the story has just gotten so convoluted that, like, what Chris is admitting to, quote unquote, isn't physically possible.
Exactly.
Like, it's just ridiculous.
Exactly.
And now, because Chris's lawyer is like, Carol, we got to talk about false confessions. There's an expert here.
Yes.
His name is Steve Drizzen.
Oh my God, I screamed.
I screamed too. And I was like, I felt like Buddy the Elf, like, oh my God, I know him. I do not know him.
No.
I just love him.
Yeah.
And Lorna Ryder. I think they're amazing.
If you don't remember, these are Brendan Dassey's attorneys in, I think it was the second season of Making a Murderer.
Yeah.
They were the ones from like the Innocence Project trying to get Brendan Dassey out.
And they're also like professors at Northwestern,
Yes.
I think, or I know that Steve Drizzen definitely is. But they're all about like educating people on wrongful convictions
Yes.
and like trying to right the wrongs of the system. They're awesome.
Steve could not believe when he picked up the phone and it was Carol, because he was like, I don't get calls from victims' family members. I'm just so impressed by her.
Carol rules.
Yeah, she
She's
does.
so awesome.
Yeah. She just wants to do the right thing. She just wants to get him out.
You know, and it feels like she is, I'm sure she has like an amazing support system, but it just feels like she's at the helm of all of this. Like she's just like kicking doors down and just not taking no for an answer. And why should she? So now, not only is she trying to get justice for her daughter, she's trying to get justice. She's trying to get Chris out of prison because she learned about wrongful convictions and she's like, that can't be right. And she's also trying to get the guy who actually did this.
I know.
She must be exhausted.
Steve Drizzen analyzes all of Chris's interrogation tapes.
If you look at these videos from start to finish, this is a textbook case of psychological coercion. This isn't Chris's confession. This is Jared Furman's fantasy of how this crime occurred. And there's no evidence to back it up.
And there's no evidence to back it up. And then we see the judge says at the conclusion of Chris's first trial where he gets convicted, had there been no confession, there would not have been a conviction in this case.
That's it. That's all you really need.
Yeah.
It just gets even worse. Like Chris would change a story 6 or 7 times, and before every change of the story, the cops would come and like hook him up to the lie detector.
That's important because again, his attorney abandons him.
Oh my God.
So he's being like, he's telling a story and they're like, no, that's not what we need. We're going to polygraph you and see if that's right. Oh, you said you found her in the living room? Did you mean you found her in the bedroom? And he would say bedroom. And they say, oh, you nailed that. You got that 100% right. So then that becomes his story. And he thinks he's doing what he's supposed to do because he thinks he's got this immunity deal.
Right.
This is why his story keeps changing. He's like, I'll tell them whatever they want me to say because it's going to get me off the hook.
I mean, we hear this 1,000 times, but then they would threaten him with the death penalty to get him to say that, like, this is unconscionable.
Exactly.
Like, they're the fucking mayor and the captain of the police force. These two guys who are doing this evil thing to this kid.
It's unbelievable.
I can't believe it. And now at this point, like, time is just going by. Everyone involved has retired. Now they refuse to comment. Like, we're long past 2012, the last time Keith sat down with them.
Yeah.
They refuse to comment. No one's taking any accountability. And they're just like, I'd do the exact same thing today. Honestly, I would do it exactly the same way. If my son was in there, I'd be proud of the work being done by my fellow cops. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
And it's like, are you aware that this is gonna, like, we're gonna watch this? Like, this is gonna go out. We're gonna see, like, and there's no repercussions for these people.
None.
There's no repercussions.
So, because this is where, like, Keith says to them,
For 2 guys who interviewed this person over and over again, and found that in the first interview, the second interview, the 3rd interview, the 4th interview, the 5th interview, the 6th interview, he lied like a sidewalk. Then you finally get to the 7th interview, and that's the gospel truth.
No.
so this guy lied like a sidewalk. For the first
He lied like a sidewalk.
6 confessions, he lied like a sidewalk. Now, but like 7th time's a charm. Like that's when he decided to tell the truth. And this happened without you feeding him any of that truth.
Right.
And they're just like, yeah, that's exactly what happened, Keith. And then, like, now we see the clips of it not happening.
Yes. I remember thinking about this with Serial, too. Like, these fucking cops probably never thought, they do this all the time. They've done this all through their career. They never thought anyone was going to come through and, like, pick apart a case.
Yeah.
You know? And of course they have to defend their work and stand by it and say, we did everything by the book. But, like, are they shitting themselves when Keith leaves for the day?
Yeah. And, that's the thing that should be keeping us all up at night. The fact that, like, they're too good at this. They've done this before.
Exactly.
This is not the first time they've done this.
And
they know what works.
They also exist in a vacuum where they're telling each other, this is the right thing. We're going to get the guy. This is definitely him. Are we the only ones who remember there's no evidence that Chris was there?
None.
The only evidence that got him convicted was a confession. The judge said so himself. And the confession only happened because you coerced him over 40 hours and 6 polygraph tests.
I mean, even more than that, because then, like, now it just keeps going and going. You know what I mean? And Keith said, like, Keith is trying to give them an out. Not like it would redeem them in any way.
Yeah.
But he just keeps asking, are you sure? He asked them several times for someone to say, like, there's no chance he didn't do it. Like, you're right. Like,
right.
He just keeps...
but you're positive.
Just like
100%.
The cameras are rolling.
Right.
This will live forever on an app eventually called Peacock. Well, we can't get into it right now. Right, yeah. But they will not
The future's wild,
like,
gentlemen, but that's not what we're going to talk about.
I can see it all. Me and the tortoises down in the Galapagos where we got this. But he just keeps giving them an opportunity to maybe have some accountability, and they just won't. No.
And because we keep seeing like the shady shit that they did, like, for example, they take him to the crime scene and like walk him through, and they don't videotape any of it. And somebody points out to us,
this is an investigation where a lot of the material was videoed. There is just no excuse for not doing that. And the reason why I think Detective Furman didn't do it is because without a tape, he could say that Chris came up with these facts on his own.
The one time they don't have it on video is when they take him to the crime scene for the first time to show him how the apartment was laid out because he didn't know.
He didn't know it.
To show him where they found the body because he didn't know.
He didn't know.
And, Steve Drisson is the one who points out, like, without videotaped evidence, the detectives can tell us, no, he took us to the crime scene and he showed us where everything was. Of course,
yeah, it all depends on how they write it in their statement or write it in their paperwork. You know what I mean? Like, they are controlling this narrative all across the board.
And it's wild because, like, after they go to the crime scene, the next video is of them back in the interrogation room. And it's like, at this point, Chris and that Furman guy are basically working out the bullshit story together. Because once again, Chris thinks he has an immunity deal, and he says to Furman, next you're probably going to say, I did the whole thing by myself. Am I right? And Furman goes, probably. And Chris laughs. He has no idea that that's exactly what's happening.
Because they have broken him down so much that now it does feel like they're in on it together. Right. It does feel like they're helping each other out here.
Exactly.
It's fucked up.
Because the very next day, Chris writes the confession that is the thing that gets him convicted.
Right.
So he writes the confession that gets him convicted, even though there's absolutely no evidence beyond the confession.
Yeah.
He gets the conviction. Steve Drisson says, this is the worst confession I've ever seen. This is the one that keeps me up at night. And this is the guy that was trying to get Brendan Dassey out of prison based on his confession. Remember how bad that was?
Yeah.
We watched the cop feed Brendan all of the information, and he just regurgitated it back.
This guy teaches a course at Northwestern about this.
And this is the worst he's ever seen. This is the one that keeps him up at night.
Come on. So, again, like, these years are going by. It's like 10, 11 years after the murder.
And more people keep signing on to his innocence. We learn about the Judges for Justice.
Yeah.
Like, they're on it. The Idaho Innocence Project. The mother of the fucking victim.
Yeah.
How is this not enough for a judge?
And now, at the same time, though, science is evolving. You can do more with the DNA testing. So now, the lawyers, the Innocence Project, Carol, they're all trying to get more evidence tested because you can do things now that you couldn't do in 1996.
Yes.
So Chris, quote, confessed to touching Angie's sweatpants and a teddy bear. So they sent those for sophisticated DNA testing.
I gotta say, because I know like the shit that Damien goes through, like trying to get the evidence tested.
Oh,
I was surprised that like they're requesting to get the t-shirt and the teddy bear tested, and the state allows that to happen.
I know, especially when the mayor was part of this
confession
and the captain of the... Yeah, I don't know how they did it.
And it seemed like it got done pretty fast.
The results showed no trace of Chris Tapp.
It very clearly says Chris Tapp is excluded. It definitely puts the semen donor at the crime scene.
The only DNA evidence they find is of the guy with the pubic hair and the semen.
Yeah.
It's one intruder.
Like, give me a break. So Carol is just like, fudge, or again, whatever Mormons say.
No coffee. They're not allowed caffeine.
They are not allowed caffeine.
I can't imagine.
Or booze.
Which is, I
was going to say.
We got to move on. I can't.
I was like, really going to hold tight on that coffee thing, huh? Weird. Carol has fucking had it. And she learns about these genealogy sites that are really becoming quite the thing back in, 2011 or whatever. And she wants to submit DNA to Ancestry.com and see what's going on to try to find the killer. Like, maybe this will work because the cops certainly aren't doing anything.
What I want to say here is, once again, I'm not defending the cops because it is the cops that submit the profile to Ancestry, which I was shocked by. Mm-hmm. I've never heard of that before.
Probably because there's, it's been 10 years, maybe the garbage.
I was going to say, it's not that I've not heard of cops using genealogy, obviously Golden State Killer and a million other cases, but Ancestry.com being like a for-profit company, there's that other cop DNA site site that they'll use. So Ancestry is like the largest, and I was surprised that the cops so willingly did it. But remember, the cops maintain Chris was there, he did the murder, but they are still holding on to the third man theory.
Yeah.
So they are like trying to find that guy too.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's like, oh my God, it's gone on so long that they believe their own bullshit.
Exactly.
Like, is that really what is happening here? That they're like, oh, right, that third guy. It's no, that only guy.
Exactly.
What?
Right. But they submit it to Ancestry and they get a hit, and they get a close hit.
To this guy, Michael Ursary Jr.
Yeah, and so this guy is a filmmaker in New Orleans, and he's like an independent filmmaker who makes like horror movies.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh shit, like this could be the guy.
Guess what? He's not the guy.
He's not the guy.
He's
and
not
it's kind of like, it's weird because like we get all the science and I don't really understand it, but it's like...
He wasn't a match to the semen left at the crime scene. So detectives knew that he did not murder Angie. But police began investigating whether someone related to him did.
The Y DNA strand that's passed down basically unchanged in most instances from father to son. And they began looking at relatives of Michael Ursary Sr.
So then they're like, did his son do it?
And it could go back like several generations. So I guess that's considered a close hit. But like, if you think about going back to like, then it could be any of the male cousins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So we don't...
But I'm like, could we just test everybody in the fucking family?
Right.
Or I'm like, hey, Ursary, who didn't do it. Sorry for pulling you off the movie set.
Sorry.
Do you have a weirdo cousin that you think might be a killer?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
So it's 2016, and enough people have been making enough noise about Chris and his innocence and getting him out of prison. Finally, the prosecutor agrees to commission an independent review of the case, which again is huge.
And they get this guy, a former criminal investigator from Idaho. He's given the task of scrutinizing the entire murder investigation. The review takes 14 months and costs $32,000, and they want me to care about that. I'm like, this guy's been in prison for
do your fucking job.
16 years, 20 years at this
do
fucking
your
point.
job beforehand so we don't have to deal with this. We're wasting too much time on getting people out of prison who shouldn't be there in the first place when real killers and abusers are loose. I don't understand it.
And so this commission finds that Chris's confessions about his involvement in the murder were either tainted, questionable, or unlikely because the detectives tainted his interviews by giving him information about the crime.
Right. But nothing happens.
But the commission says, like, yes, they were feeding him information and his confession is fucked, but he still knew too much, so he had to be there.
Okay, I feel crazy.
I know.
I feel insane because even Carol's like, I'm sorry, what? The science says he wasn't there.
Right.
The science saying he's not there, plus this independent report saying, yeah, the cops definitely tainted what he said. Like, put two and two together.
It's just like, but the thing is, what's so aggravating is that it becomes so clear that the cops are never going to willingly let Chris out of prison because they have to stand by their shitty work, right?
Yes.
Even though, like Carol keeps saying, we keep finding more DNA. Every time, first it was just the semen, then it was the pubic hairs, then it was the DNA on the sweatshirt and the teddy bear. All of it belongs to one and the same person. There's no evidence that Chris was in the room.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
And it's never going to matter. The cops always have to stick by the shitty work that they did.
And this is why there's value in getting some new names and faces in there. It's why Damien and Lori helped campaign for Judge Burnett to actually win his race so he wouldn't be a fucking judge anymore and we can get some fresh eyes on this case.
But that's what happens here. There's a new judge assigned to the case. Keith says the Honorable Alan Stevens.
Yeah. That's what they call judges, the Honorable so-and-so.
Especially Keith. He seems to really like this guy.
He loves it.
But he says
Chris's petitions for post-conviction relief could move forward. The judge scheduled back-to-back hearings in April 2017 that would examine the new DNA evidence and allegations of a coerced and false confession.
That is maybe as close to a new trial without an order for a new trial as you can get in the judicial system here.
This is as close as you can get to a new trial without the order for a new trial in the judicial system. So this new awesome judge circumvents everything everybody else did by
and does it quickly.
Right, exactly. And he essentially orders a new trial, but like does it in like the backdoor way.
And so here's what he does. It's essentially a resentencing. So Chris is still a convicted murderer, but he'd get let out immediately. The state would vacate the rape charge, but he stays a convicted murderer. So it's like a little bit like an Alfred plea, but they're not calling it that.
Yeah, and like the thing that was making me crazy about this was was like, okay, this is great for Chris because if he takes this deal, he's going to get out today. And I was at first,
and there's like a team of people fighting for his innocence to be exonerated.
Yes, but my thought was if he stays a convicted murderer, which he will, I was afraid that the state was no longer going to keep looking for the person that Carol's been out there looking for 20 years at this point.
Right.
That is not the case because the police do acknowledge the third man was also there.
Right.
So both can happen. Chris can get out and the case stays open and active.
Right.
At this resentencing where Chris gets out, Carol takes the stand. She's sobbing. I'm sobbing.
I know.
She is like, this is where I wrote, she's the best person we've ever covered. When he gets released that day, Carol is sitting next to his mother.
I know.
He comes over and collapses into both of their arms.
And she's like apologizing to him for what she's been through.
Yep. But she's also looking at him saying,
You promised me you don't let her down.
I won't.
You don't let Carol down. You do all that you can do for her, Christopher.
Don't give up on Angie.
Yeah.
We're in this to the end.
And like they are.
I know.
And so like
I know.
Everyone vows not to give up except for the shitty cops.
So like that's kind of how the episode ends. Everyone vows not to give up. They used the DNA profile to create 2 sketches of the killer.
Right.
I'm sorry to inform you that the killer is Rob McClure of the great Broadway.
Asterisk. He's not.
But the DNA, the sketch of the killer based on the DNA looked so much like this Broadway actor Rob McClure. I had to send you a side-by-side picture.
And I didn't notice it at first, but when you said, I was like, you went on Canva?
I went on Canva and
gave
made
me
a side-by-side.
side.
Tell me it's not a dead fucking ringer.
It was a little jarring to see it side-by-side. Like
wild.
That. I'm sorry.
Rob, I love you.
I love you, Rob.
So like that's how the documentary ends. And then we get the on-screen text that in 2019, Idaho Falls police arrested 53-year-old Brian Dripps Sr.
They kept using this genetic genealogy. That's how they get him.
Fam, this guy was Angie's across the street neighbor. He's the killer.
Yeah.
He did it.
They got his DNA from a discarded cigarette, and it's a fucking match.
It's a match, to which I say, Chris spent 20 years in prison.
23.
Did you even question the across the street neighbor? I'm thinking you did not.
No.
Because every one of these interrogations, we have the video.
Yeah.
But we didn't see any of like this guy.
Yeah.
You did the across the street neighbor?
The across the street neighbor. I do have good news. He's spending the rest of his pathetic life in prison.
Good.
There's that, at least.
And 2 months after Dripps' arrest, Chris Tapp was cleared of all charges in Angie's murder, and he was exonerated.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great. Does he get to sue now?
Yeah. May those cops never know peace or happiness.
Yeah.
May every street they walk on be paved with like the sharpest Lego pieces for all eternity with their least favorite song on a loop at level 15 volume.
Definitely.
That's it. And fire ants. And it's always 110 degrees.
Yeah. Are we done?
And they're forced to eat their least favorite food. It's the only thing.
Yes. Oh my God. Fam, we did, what's it called?
It's called Who Killed Angie Dodge? Keith Morrison Investigates.
All right, fam, listen, one more time. I'm doing my book release party September 26th at an undisclosed location in New York City, and you're invited. It's
a very fun location.
Very fun location. It's open bar, open food, open everything. Drag queens performing. If you got a book coming to you through coming to one of our live shows, you're going to pick it up there. I'm going to sign it to you. We're going to take pictures.
Are you doing like a full book signing?
Oh, yeah. Well, kind of like I want to dance and drink and hang out with the listeners and take pictures, and you're going to be there. It's going to be so fun. All you have to do to get invited, text me 917-983-3733. We can invite 200 of you. So text today. We're going to get back to you this week with all the details. We're picking at random. Like, it's all going to go through an app, and we're picking it all at random.
Okay, great.
And join our Patreon.
Yeah, we're having fun over there.
350 full ad-free bonus episodes. You get a bonus episode every single Friday.
Yeah.
If you get to the end of the Tuesday app and you're like, I could use another one of those this week. If you're on the Patreon, guess what? It's coming. Patreon.com/TrueCrimeObsessed, or go to our website, click on the Patreon link.
Yeah.
Well, stay tuned for our funny and hilarious outtakes.
Yeah, sure.
My book's coming out like in a month.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Oh my God. All right, fam, we love you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Some of my women friends just instinctively know how to parent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they know automatically what age the kid should get the cell phone and exactly how to treat the cell phone and how to treat the social media. Carol is that kind of parent. Yeah. I am not. All of it is a struggle.
Carol,
all of it, I'm constantly guessing.
Thing?
I'm Googling. Daisy's like, Daddy, can I have a phone? And I'm like, no. And I Google, how old do kids should they be when you get a phone? Yeah. How do I handle my kids' social media?
Can't you get her one of those emergency phones? Like the phones we record on where it's like you can't use it as a phone?
God, even you're a better mother than me.
But don't they have those?
They do. Yeah. U.S. Cellular, in fact.
Should I be insulted by even you're a better mother?
I just mean by the fact that you're not a mother and you don't want to be one. You're already better at it than I am.
I don't think that's true, but...
God damn it, I'm handsome. I'm sorry.
Just falling into your own reflection. You are.
I broke the
what?
mold.
Oh, I was going to say, wait a second.
No,
I am very pro. I am very pro feeling and loving yourself and catching your reflection and going, who's that? Oh,
fuck, it's me.
Oh, it's me.
Fuck.
I look amazing.
God damn it.
I love that.
It just means, well, now I'm annoyed because I can't make out with that guy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You can make out with the mirror.
I guess that's true.